So this week's topic is, I'm reviewing a book, and let me grab it, called The Soul's Gift. And The Soul's Gift was written by Robert Schwartz, and it's the healing power of the life you planned before you were born, which may sound like kind of woo-woo and like, really? What's that all about? You really plan your life before you come into the body? Well, you know, if you think about it, how else are you going to come into the body? I mean, you require a little bit of planning, like, okay, I got to get the heart and the lungs and the face and the body in order, and I got to decide, all right, what parent is going to, who do I want to pair with as a parent energetically, you know, all this stuff. If you think about it, like, it kind of makes sense to make a plan before you kind of come into planet Earth. And Robert Schwartz also wrote, his original book is called Your Soul's Plan, which is discovering the real meaning of the life you planned before you were born. So that's his first one, and they're both very similar. But before I get into reviewing the book and discussing the notion of rebirth planning, right? It's like, ooh, can sound a little weird and woo-woo. The reason the book came across my my awareness was I belonged to a website called consciousnesscalibrations.com. That website will calibrate all different topics like movies, songs, books, authors, speakers, events, things that are going on in the world. Everything you could ever consider, it's available on consciousnesscalibrations.com, and it's taking what Dr. Hawkins has done in all of his books, like Power versus Force, Truth versus Falsehood, and going a step beyond, because Dr. Hawkins passed in 2012, so there's really no current calibrations going on that I'm sure there are other groups that are, I know other groups are doing this, but this one feels like a really solid group that is of higher consciousness, cares about the truth. It's clinically removed from stuff that goes on in this world, doesn't need to be corrupted by stuff that isn't true. And the book, The Soul's Gift, calibrated at a high level of consciousness. And if you go to consciousnesscalibrations.com, you can search for it to get the exact calibration. As I recall, it was in the high 300s. And what was interesting to me about that is that it was similar in calibration to the book Conversations with God, and which both are very high consciousness, and they both hold significant truths at that level of awareness. So understand that it's a high level of awareness for humans to kind of read that and accept it and understand it in the high 300s, never mind Dr. Hawkins' level of books in the 600s, 700s, 800s, 900s. That's a totally different realm for advanced spiritual students that care about aligning with truth and power, the truth of God, the truth of divinity and all of that. That's a totally different ball game. Dr. Hawkins would attest, and I would attest, to pursue enlightenment, and the consciousness of enlightenment starts at 600 and goes up to 1,000, is radical in nature. And I can assure you, I didn't know I was pursuing enlightenment, but I got it. I came into the awareness of significant enlightened states on at least 24 occasions at last count over extended periods of time. So anyway, I like to turn to that website for books, because I don't want to read books that hold no truth, that are trying to, teach you, self-help books that hold no truth don't help you. They corrupt you and they lead you down a path that isn't true. So you don't want to go there. And you also don't want to blame the author for creating it, because they don't know any better either, because they haven't come into the awareness. The ego thinks they know things and they want to prove themselves right and teach others. And that's kind of the energy of anything below 200. You don't necessarily, unless it's just for entertainment, you can read a book about murder mystery or, stuff that's negatively oriented, and that's just for entertainment purposes. That's something different. This book is for spiritual growth and development, personal growth and development, and I'm kind of interested in non-physical reality and consciousness. So your soul's gift kind of addresses that. Now, before I get into the core content of the book, I got to tell you, when I read this book, I came into a whole level of acceptance kind of just came into me. And acceptance on the map of consciousness is 350. And that's the level of consciousness where you're willing to accept you're the creator of your own experience. And that's a very high level to honestly be able to say, I'm willing to accept that. Many people will not accept that because we're still hanging out in victimhood on many topics. We think we're powerless victims on a wide variety of topics, which holds no truth. You are not. You are super powerful. Within all of us is the superpower to create what we want in the life that we want. So when I heard that 350 was the level of truth, that it's true that we're the creator of our own experience, I was not willing to accept that when I heard it. And I first heard it when I listened to Law of Attraction when they first came out, and Esther and Jerry Hicks. And Abraham's always trying to get you that, when they're talking, they're like, you've got to be willing to accept you're the creator of your own experience. And when I first heard that, I didn't want to accept it. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I would not have created that. I created some horrific experiences for myself. And I'm like, there's no way in hell I would have consciously created that. So I was in denial. However, when I came into the map of consciousness and I understood how true that was, I could only accept. I'm like, all right, I'm willing to accept that's the truth. And I understand it makes sense to do so. And I've been through such tremendous experiences on both sides of the eye, about higher and lower consciousness. And I'm like, all right, if I'm the creator, I got to step it up and step into courage and take responsibility for my life and stop giving my power away and thinking I'm a victim, which I did for many years. Those horrific things that traumatize you, you are in the energy field of despair and victimhood. So it took a while to work my way out of that. So with that understanding, when you read The Soul's Gift, I gotta forewarn you, you're coming into a whole new level of understanding. And that understanding is that there's something going on in consciousness at a spirit level where you consciously plan your birth and your life to an extent. And according to the book, I'm not sure what the calibration of the truth of this is, but the book itself calibrates it true at a high level. So it's likely holds some truth to it. 70% of your life is pre-planned in the pre-birth planning stage. And this is where like soul contracts come into play, which I've always questioned soul contracts. I'm like, what's the point of having a contract? What's the point of free will if you have a contract? And having read the book, I now understand what that means. So I want to tell you a story. Before this book came into my awareness, I always had, I'm fairly highly intuitive, which I never would call myself that, but other healers and kind of spiritual healers that I've worked with said, like, Liz, you're really intuitive, highly intuitive and powerful. I'm like, okay, whatever. I like kind of dismiss it. And I think I dismiss it because I've always just been who I've been, not understanding that, oh, that's intuition. Oh, okay. I've always had it and kind of just went with it, unknowing. I just thought that's just what it is. It's just life. You get it or you don't get it. So people pointed out to me that, they're kind of making a point like, you're like more intuitive and powerful than you realize. I'm like, I always had a sense I was powerful, but not like in an ego way. I had a sense like I'm powerful, but I just don't, what am I going to, I don't know what to do with it, but I just got I had a sense of self that was powerful. I'm like, okay. So point being, what was my point? I wanted to talk about intuition. Oh, yes, I know what it is now. Sorry, I had a brain fart there. So I had this understanding that, and accepting that I'm intuitive, and I understand that we are all lava lamps of consciousness, and we have access to everything we could want. I'm like, okay, I can accept that too. It's like there's no barrier to knowing, there's no barrier to the truth, there's no barrier to what you imagine. So as I've spoken about in other videos about this quantum spiritual awakening, I have a whole video on that and what that is. Having gone through it was so traumatic for me. I started to ask questions like, how did I create that? What's going on there? Blah, blah, blah. All these stories I started to make up. And this quantum spiritual awakening came about after meeting somebody. And in my linear mind, I thought, oh, I thought there was a this causing a that, seemingly. Like, oh. And so I had this I tell myself this story, which I would love to share with the person who I'm talking about here. Like, I think that you and I, we were sitting up there in the cosmos, sitting on the ledge of the moon. And if you look at the logo of Steven Spielberg's movie making, his company, Amblin Entertainment, there's this kid sitting on the crescent moon fishing. You kind of see the silhouette of it. That was kind of the visual I've had of me and this other person in spirit, like hanging out, looking down at Earth, thinking, hey, all right, this is what you're going to do. And then this is what I'm going to do. And then we're going to meet. And I think the soul's gift mentions that you're going to come into contact with someone that's going to be like a cosmic bumper car. And this is pretty apt for this particular relationship, where you got to bump into this person and then something's going to change within you. And I had this kind of imagining about having planned that. And this would kind of address soul contract type of stuff. Like, I promise to be this for you. I have to say, within the year after my quantum spiritual awakening and all the havoc it wreaked on my nervous system, my psyche, all of me, I was completely annihilated by the experience. And grief-stricken. I was in despair for quite a while. That spirit came to me, the spirit of this other person, kind of at a much higher level, seemingly. It really felt kind of like a conversation with God. In reality, if you've read Conversations with God, God's kind of saying the same thing in regard to being the creator of your own experience. Spirit, I heard, like clairaudiently, spirit say, I promise to be this person for you. I agreed to show up in this way and be this person for you, even though it didn't turn out the way you had hoped or thought it should have. It served another purpose. So I'd already had experience of spirit talking to me on several occasions. There was another occasion where I was just in so much grief and anguish and despair that I heard spirit kind of come from my throat. That's kind of the energy of it. And I heard this is a soul purpose. That which you are focused on, that which you are in despair about right now, serves the soul. I heard it loud and clear, soul purpose. I'm like, so this is kind of my introduction many years ago into this topic known as the soul's gift, right? So what Rob Schwartz is speaking about here, and I'm going to read some of the back because it's nice little prompts for conversation, is that, and Rob also went through kind of a quantum pretty significant spiritual awakening in May of 2003, which is when it started for me as well, which is interesting. The energies for awakenings, you know, we have similarities here. Similar experiences were happening at the same time. I'm like, well, that's pretty interesting. So I'm going to read a little bit on the back of the book because it's got all the juiciest stuff. Then I'll comment on some of the stuff. So in his groundbreaking first book, Your Soul's Plan, Discovering the Real Meaning of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born, Rob Schwartz brought the idea of pre-birth planning into the mainstream. So this is kind of the first step. And I have to tell you, if you're not willing to accept you're the creator of your own experience fully, then you might have a hard time with this, because this is like a step up into a whole other level of acceptance. And I felt some anger and kind of victimhood stuff when I was reading this book, but I also came into, and it's kind of rare when this happens, even Dr. Hawkins would say it's rare that you would experience a pure level of consciousness like acceptance. So I felt acceptance like enter my energy field. I'm like, and whether I liked it or not, the energy of I got it, I got to take responsibility here and step into the courage of acceptance. I'm like, all right, I understand. And I'm willing to accept now that the soul has a different purpose. The soul is after something different, which is what Conversations with God is all about. God's like, you know, the ultimate purpose for the soul is to experience who it really is in the body. And that's what enlightenment is. It's coming into the awareness of the presence of God within you and all others. That's what enlightenment is. And that is not of this world for sure. And it's an experience of the awareness of yourself within, as God-Godding. And it's a tremendous experience that I can tell you, it's difficult to describe because it's not of this world. It's ineffable, as Dr. Hawkins would describe it. And Dr. Hawkins describes it continuously because he evolved into very high levels of consciousness, like the Buddha and Jesus, which are not of this world, at 1,000 on the map of consciousness. It's huge. It's beyond description. It's also a radical pursuit. If you're not ready for it and you don't have conscious awareness of the map of consciousness, is helpful before you decide to, you know, the ego will be like, oh yeah, I'll show you, I'll get to enlightenment. That's called force. And you don't want to force enlightenment. So in any event, Conversations with God is saying, hey, this is what we're after here. The soul is after the experience of itself in the body. And the soul is after your experience of understanding its worth within the context of being in the body and the contrast. And Conversations with God is always, you know, God in the conversation, he or she, however you want to look at it. God is really neutral gender, is saying, I know what you want as a personality, but I also am aware of what the soul is after. And the soul is after the feeling of worthiness, the feeling of oneness, the feeling of true love at high levels, 500, inner joy at 540, you know, whatever. So the two go hand in hand nicely. Conversations with God, book 1, and this one. So let me just read further about the book here. But I did want to forewarn you that you've got to be kind of an advanced spiritual aspirant and be willing to let go of victimhood, even though we all got victimhood on some topic. But you got to be willing to step into significant courage and acceptance that there's another level of creation going on in the pre-birth planning, and that the soul's intention To experience hardship is with meaningful purpose. And I'll tell you, like, some of the stuff they're talking about here, you're like, you've got to be kidding me. You know, so essentially, let me just read this. I'll try to stay on track. And we're going to get to what I'm going to tell you next. So this brilliant sequel delves even deeper by exploring the pre-birth planning of difficult situations that all of us would be like, who in hell would come and plan this situation? Some of them are spiritual awakening, which was super helpful to me to have this as a topic, because I had a quantum spiritual awakening that was heaven on earth and hell on earth, beyond hell, not of this world, both ends. It'll talk about miscarriage and abortion, caregiving for whomever. Like, there's stories about a woman who had two seriously disabled kids with what's the shoot, I can't think of what it's called now. When kids like can't communicate well, but they're geniuses at something. Why is it beyond my memory right now what that's called? Anyway, you know what it is. It'll come to me. So saying yes, or even having a Down syndrome child, you agree to that. That's a pre-birth planning thing. That's not just haphazard. Giving birth to a child with difficulties is a pre-birth planning thing. You agree to that at a higher level because it serves the soul of the child to come in to the life as disabled in some way. And it serves the parent as well to have to step into that role. However, that role could look like two different sides of the coin, which is interesting. Abusive relationships are a pre-birth planning thing, which sounds hard to swallow. Incest is a pre-birth planning thing. Adoption, poverty, suicide, rape, mental illness. You're like, are you kidding me? So this is where, if you suffered anything like this type of seeming loss and seeming victimhood, poor me, why did this happen to me? Excuse me while I take a sip. It's highly likely it was part of a pre-birth plan. And my understanding is you've got to bring in other souls that are agreeable to this. And it's super interesting. We'll get deeper into about the book, but I encourage you to read the book too. So it's talking about how we as spirits pre-plan things based on our own energy as a spirit, essentially. And this is kind of like, we would call it karma. And many of us could perceive karma as like punishment when it's not really, that's not what karma is. It's a propensity energetically to manifest in particular ways. So at a spirit level, when you come in and out of the body hundreds of times, like most of these case studies that Rob is talking about recognizes through the help of gifted mediums that most of us have hundreds of lives on the planet, never mind other dimensions, hundreds of lives, which we don't lack awareness of. But there is, there's many ways to regress and pick up on past lives and stuff that went on in past lives. But energetically, the soul picks up all the energy and the consciousness of past lives. It kind of throws its energy, which is loving, unconditionally loving by nature, out of whack. So at a soul level, essentially what's going on is the soul's like, you know what? I really need to experience an abusive relationship with a parent. Energetically, that's going to kind of balance me out. This is simplified. This is highly simplified, but I want to at least explain it to you. And I'll just use this as an example. So what's going on at a spirit level is there's like spirit guides that work with us. And then there's the souls of others, which is where the soul contract comes in. And let's say a parent, as a spirit, I need a mother, let's say, who's abusive toward me. I'm asking for it. I'm the creator. This is what I want. And at a spirit level, a soul level, the soul knows that this type of suffering is fine. I mean, I can, as a soul, you're like, sure, I understand what we're doing here, and it's meaningful. Because at a soul level, it's eternal love, unconditional love. It's la la land, essentially. And there's no contrast. So you're okay with it because you're just going to come back to la la land eventually. So the soul has chosen a partner to be the mother. Like, okay, I want you to be my mother, and I want you to abuse me. That's what you're saying. And the mother, as spirit, has to agree to it as well. And it's interesting that at a spirit level, the mother who needs to be abusive is like, I don't, they can feel like, I don't really want to do that to you because I love you. And this is where unconditional love and the energy of love is the truth comes in. And I kind of got this, and I'm going to come back to this in a second. But so that abusive mother spirit is like, you know what? I love you, and I wouldn't deny you what you want. And I understand why you want it. So I will agree, this is my soul contract, to be abusive towards you. And me, as the soul that wants the abusive mother, is like eternally grateful. Like, thank you. I so appreciate that you're going to do this for me. You're helping me in a big way. So this is kind of the high level understanding and acceptance you got to come to, because everything is love in this world. And when you come into enlightened states, that's all you see. That's what you understand. You understand that this particular abusive relationship was lovingly intended and played out with love at its core, not at the abusive energy that we experience. So that's just a quickie understanding, kind of encapsulating all this. So this book has case studies of all of these different scenarios. And though I haven't had all of these scenarios in my own life, I related to every one of them. And I started to get this energy of acceptance that, okay, I understand divinity. Divinity is all love, period. But if you've read Conversations with God, God's like, I'm going to create contrast. Otherwise, I can't know myself, right? Because I'm all that is. I can't know myself without taking myself out of who I am, going to planet Earth as an example, and being who I'm not. So these two go hand in hand in understanding. It'd be helpful to have both of them because they're both of high consciousness, and they both play off each other, especially when you're stepping into this. This is more advanced spiritual acceptance that spirit has a say in all this. And the ultimate purpose of all of these seemingly suffering things, even AIDS is a topic in here. Spirit comes here to experience AIDS. I mean, that's a harsh one. It takes a lot of freaking courage to agree to. And by the way, your personality is in on it as well. It's kind of another aspect of you that's in agreement with the souls you contract with. The personality and your soul are all kind of like a lava lamp of consciousness agreeing to the whole package. And admittedly, the personality kind of can make many choices. The personality has free will to make choices. This is like the other 30% of life. Like, where's life going to lead? And the personality can kind of lead it and get in the way of the soul. Because the bottom line to all of this suffering is to transcend the suffering and come into acceptance of your own worthiness and your own sense of self. That's the common thread in all of it. is to let go of the lower levels, which I've been teaching this whole time, how to let go of suppressed and repressed emotions and surrender to the truth that you're worthy. Surrender to higher consciousness at all levels. You can step into courage. You can step into neutral. You can step into willingness. You can step into acceptance. This is kind of the progression up the higher into higher consciousness and understanding. So that's essentially what you may not enjoy. You'll enjoy the read because it's pretty fascinating that there are spiritual mediums that can connect to another dimension and actually be present witnessing the pre-birth planning of souls. So Rob gives an example of his case study. So he'll bring someone in who experienced AIDS, right? Deciding to come in as a homosexual man with abusive parents and getting AIDS as a choice. And kind of connecting. So the spiritual medium who has this gift, this is kind of the ability, it's kind of an Akashic Records ability as well. If you know, Akashic Records are higher consciousness as well, which is more of a reading kind of the whole encyclopedia of the history of the soul that you are, can be found in the Akashic Records, as well as this kind of pre-birth planning thing. It's this amazing gift. And in the past, I would have dismissed it as woo-woo, except for now I'm a medium myself. And I have so many mediums say to me, Liz, you're a medium, you know. I'm like, apparently. And I understand it because I get these visuals and I hear spirit and I get these amazing like clairvoyant images of like, whoa, what the heck is, you know, some of them are just out there interesting and I don't get them, but others are quite clear. Like, you know what? You got to be careful of that dog of yours. She's going to get hit by a car. And I dismissed it. I saw it clearly and I just dismissed it because I probably didn't want to face it. But that was just an example of a vision I got and it came true right before my eyes. So anyway, I have particular gifts on the mediumship front. It doesn't usually involve helping others. It's just messages for me in general. Whereas there's some mediums that can, and people that Rob are connected to that have this gift of looking at pre-birth plans, which is pretty freaking fascinating and super helpful to read through these case studies, because we're not alone in the suffering here. And we're not alone in coming into acceptance that it takes courage to come to earth for the personality and the soul to experience the suffering, understanding that it's going to shift the energy of spirit and balance it out and it helps in other ways that we're unaware of. So I just want to read a little bit more here so that you can, you know, check out the book yourself. Again, it's calibrated of higher consciousness, so you can trust and have faith in what it says. And same with conversations with God, the similar consciousness is being relayed in these books. So working with a team of gifted mediums, Schwartz brings forth great love and wisdom from the other side to explain why such experiences are planned and the deep soul level healing they can create. So it's deep healing going on and the call to step into our own worthiness in human life. And none of this, you know, you'll get to a point where it will say, you know, you don't have to suffer to get the lessons. You can choose inner joy and love to get the lessons as well and perceive differently. But it's good to come into this awareness first so that you can then have the choice of it. Although I think the point of all of this is you got to go through some of the suffering so that the energy balances out in the way the spirit intended. So you can develop greater self-love as you become aware of the tremendous courage it takes for you to plan a life on Earth. And Dr. Hawkins talks about coming to Earth is Earth, the consciousness of Earth, which don't be disparaged, is purgatorial by nature. And it's like, you don't have to worry about going to hell. You're in it, which I think is funny. It's all how you want to perceive it. You want to be the victim of hell? Sure, have at it. I won't recommend it. It's much better to let go of the victimhood and step into kind of having fun and going with higher consciousness is much cleaner and more funner alignment. So here's the next one. In this book, you will emerge from victim consciousness to know yourself as the powerful creator of your own life. And last week, or last main topic, I spoke about love consciousness. When you come into, at that level, you'll have revelations. And I had a revelation about the tremendous power that's within all of us. And someone used the term supernova. That's kind of the vision I got. Like right in my third solar plexus chakra, I saw this vision of a supernova, and I understood that this is the power that we all have within us. It was a little scary, but true. So that came as a revelation when I was, up in the 500 area of, or above of consciousness. I was in that awareness. You can learn to forgive those who have hurt you and create a lasting inner peace. So forgiveness is pretty huge on the map of consciousness. That's 350. That's the land of acceptance. So you're willing to forgive yourself. You're willing to forgive others because they're there to provide the contrast for you. It was a plan, right? Your mother with great love, or the parent that was abusive toward you, came with great love to be that for you so that you could discover who you really are in contrast to that. So you come into forgiveness of the soul for creating it in the first place, forgiveness of you and your humanness for not knowing any better, and forgiveness of others. So that's a powerful place to step and align with, because that on the map of consciousness is quantum leap above victimhood. And that alone is going to give you the power to let go of the victimhood, because they're a totally different frequency, very different, way more powerful to accept and forgive than not. And you'll have a better understanding of the qualities you came into this lifetime to cultivate and express, which I certainly, you'll start to appreciate this when you kind of reflect on your life. It's like, all right, I do accept that the most horrendous things I've been through had a silver lining, big time, really meaningful silver linings to me. Once you move through the energy of it all, the trauma of it all, and the despair, as you move through it, you can start feeling like, okay, I understand why that was meaningful. And now you can kind of accept it at a higher level. And this accepting it at a higher level ripples out into consciousness for all of us. It shifts all of us to come into acceptance and forgiveness. It helps, it creates this trailblazer of a light, which is used in this book. We're blazing a light trail for others to follow when you come into this type of acceptance. And you'll see profound purpose in experiences that once appeared to be meaningless suffering. And Rob has felt he had meaningless suffering. I too had tremendous, seemingly meaningless suffering. And I'm sure that when I pass, I leave this body in transition back into spirit, I have to share this experience with you because it's pretty awesome what you can likely expect or hope to experience when you transition. I had the gift of having it in the body, but I've had these experiences of situations in my life that flash before me, like they come into my heart, like I see this, something from my past shows up, and then the beauty and love of it kind of explodes like a supernova. That's the best way I can describe it, of how meaningful and how much unconditional love and like divinity is present in that freaking moment is huge. And I've had quite a few of these experiences that are just profound, like, oh my God. So when you pass, you're going to have this kind of like life review likely some sort of life review where this moment will come into your awareness and this explosion of ecstasy and love and profound understanding of that moment, how significant it is. You'll experience it like, oh my God, like it's God intoxicated ecstasy, each one of those moments, like holy crow. And I have the gift of experiencing it in the body on numerous occasions. So it's not beyond the possibility, now that I blaze the trail of light for you, to have this experience as well. But it's helpful to be a little more grounded than I was in all of it. And you can develop a heartfelt knowing of your infinite worth, beauty, magnificence, and sacredness as an eternal soul. So I'm just going to read one testimonial here from James Van Praagh, who's the author of Growing Up in Heaven. He's also a well-known medium. He's a nationally world-known medium. And mediums are different than psychics. Mediums are connected with spirit, can get wisdom and guidance kind of coming through them. And this is kind of really what I accept, that I have the ability for consciousness to align with higher consciousness, so it comes out of me. I don't necessarily have to think there's another individual, although there are spirit guides and stuff. I'm willing to accept that I'm one with the spirit guide, and that this wisdom and grace and understanding higher consciousness and what needs to be heard and spoken can come through me. So that's always my intention when I'm doing these podcasts and video casts, is to speak the truth at the level that they can be heard and understood, and that I can convey. So James Van Praagh says this, as a pretty well-established medium: this book is an incredible guide map to your soul and the various jewels stored inside of it. Read this to reconnect with your true self, your true powerful self, being the spirit that you are. So that's this week's episode of your weekly dose of higher consciousness. And this is, if you're starting to feel like, victimhoody about it, that's okay. Let it pass through you, and intend to allow understanding and acceptance to kind of fill that gap. So as the victimhood and the anger and the disappointment or the fear or whatever it may be comes into your awareness, like, God made me suffer. This is like, God punishing you. No, it is not. It's coming into awareness that you as spirit at another level had a different intention, and that it serves God and a higher purpose to have created this particular hardship. And that's where, again, conversations with God, God's like, I know what you're after on a soul level. This, I think, is what God was talking